This show is made possible by our Patreon supporters. To get access to our exclusive content and support the show, visit www.patreon.com/EABB podcast. That's www.patreon.com/EABB podcast. Thanks.
Hello, and welcome to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. I'm Chris Triano, joined always by Stephen Canestrisi.
Hello.
This is episode 49, and today we're speaking with Dr. Joseph Jefferson. Dr. Joseph Jefferson is the Director of Jazz Studies and Assistant Professor of Trombone and Euphonium at Southeast Missouri State University, and he's also the Jazz Content Area Editor for the Historic Brass Today, which is the Historic Brass Society's newsletter. It was really great getting to talk to Dr. Joseph Jefferson today about shout bands in the United States, kind of a part of our ongoing series of trying to fill in the gaps of the history of brass in America. So hopefully after today, you feel much more well-rounded in your shout band knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. We think a great episode. Really excited to put this one out. As always, if you like what you're hearing, you can support us on Patreon and Teespring. You can also follow us on all social media platforms. You can get in touch with us on all social media platforms, or our email address is eabb.podcast@gmail.com. And our website is www.eabbpodcast.com, where we have show notes for every episode and a lot of other resources for you up there. So with all of that out of the way, we're really excited to get this one rolling. So here is our interview with Dr. Joseph Jefferson. Great. So we have Dr. Joseph Jefferson on the show today. Joseph, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks so much. How are you?
We're doing
Very
great.
good.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Chris, but we're doing well.
I'm doing good too. It's okay.
Good. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about, not a little bit, a lot of bit about shout bands today. But before we get into that, could you give us a little rundown of what your musical background is and how you got really interested, because you devoted your doctoral research to shout bands. So kind of maybe your background and where that interest kind of germinated from.
Well, my background, I self-taught trombonist. And so my original, I guess, education, if you will, started out in church, singing, playing behind my mom in church. So those were the humble beginnings in which I really gained an appreciation for melody, improvisation, structure, form, in terms of just understanding these basic mechanics, syncopation. And I didn't know those things at that point in time of how critical that was. But I slowly realized when I got to undergrad how much far ahead I was some of my peers, because I was dealing with that stuff from such an early age. And so it was just a really remarkable education, if you will, to have that. But during my undergraduate studies at Norfolk State University, which is a historically Black university, the trombone community in terms of that band is very tight knit, and there's a tradition that has been around for just years, probably over 30, 40 years, just in terms of that trombone community. Even the people that have went on and graduated from there, they still come back for homecoming. They still bring their horns. They still play. So it's almost like this huge fraternity just in terms of the trombone community. And so, but being in that space, that's where I kind of came in contact with people who were a part of the United House of Prayer and who had played in the shout band tradition. And so at that point, me being from Jarrett, Virginia, it was a really small town. All I knew was, my upbringing, and what I knew, what my ear could really pick up, as well as the formal things that I was learning in terms of my instruction being in school. But I knew how they played. I knew that was different. There was some secret sauce that was in there that was just, yeah, you ain't getting this from just the Arbans. So what? So where else is this coming from? And so I developed some really close relationships with those students and kind of learned from them, and just kind of picked up some things just in terms of how uncanny they were with just their oral skills and how well they could really pick up things and really learn by rote. In addition to, of course, all the formal stuff, learning how to sight read and all of those things that you learn in school. But being in Norfolk, again, I had no realization that was like a huge area just in terms of the development of the United House of Prayer. The founder, Marcelino de Gracio, or better known as Daddy Grace, had a house right on Princess Anne Road. And then when I started really kind of getting into it, and I'm in it, and I started looking at newspaper articles and everything, and I started realizing that, man, there is a lot of information that is near me.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So I know that you're a member of the Historic Brass Society, and you kind of have the interests, along with Stephen and I, in the history of brass, something that we're trying to do on the show. Although we're focusing primarily on 19th century American brass bands, everything's interconnected, and we're very much interested in trying to help give our listeners a better understanding of musical traditions, all the brass musical traditions that kind of got us to where we are today. So in addition to 19th century early American brass bands, we're talking about the Moravian brass tradition. We're talking about the Salvation Army band tradition. So our listeners might be a little bit unsure of how the shout bands in the United House of Prayer kind of falls in that same avenue of our research. Can you kind of give us maybe at first the elevator pitch explanation of what a shout band is, what the United House of Prayer is, and then we can dive in and pick it apart a little bit from there.
And I'll go there, but I'll even go one step further. When we start talking about the Moravian trombone tradition, that's the fundamental basis of the trombone ensemble that is in the university level, and so very much how it serves a purpose in terms of this, I don't want to say religious context, in terms of having this similar to the shout band, similar to the Salvation Army, which does gospel tunes and Christian tunes. The shout band is very much the same way. It is definitely paired with its religious, a religious background and focus for that. And much like those other ensembles, the purpose of having that ensemble was to move beyond being in the church to bring people in. It was an evangelical aspect to it, to really make people feel welcomed, to be able to let them know what we're doing in the church. And so I think that's a really big thing to understand about this. What is that? When you go look at when you go to a football game, right? Some people go for the football game, but the football team is terrible. They go to hear the band, right? and so the band is the biggest recruiting and the most visible thing on campus. And so having these ensembles that are not only providing musical that is for the elevation of their beliefs, it's also something that can go out and reach people in the community. And so this is definitely what the shout band does, but probably to an extent where the Moravian tradition and the the Salvation Army tradition, with the shout band, everything that's happening is by rote.
No.
And so learning from a very early age, the immersion process of just kind of being in it and understanding and hearing those sounds and picking those things up. So improvisation and just uncanny oral skills, those are things that was a little bit different, just in terms of there's not like music reading that you would see in some of those other ensembles, but in terms of playing the hymns, in terms of providing a backdrop and a musical foundation for that service or that celebration that is happening, it's definitely serving in the same capacity. But moreover, you're now looking at a section that is primarily African American. And so that's what kind of, I guess would distinguish it, being learning by rote, being primarily African American, but they all have their purpose. And I think what they kind of align with is their purpose is they are out to, of course, bring glory and really, really showcase the institution, as well as to continue to bring people in to find out a little bit more about it. I hope that kind of makes sense. I'll try to bring it all together so that the listeners would kind of know that, it's not totally just kind of like a totally different thing. There are some definite similarities for sure.
The distinction you made there, about playing by rote, is super important, because it's just learning by rote and playing by rote is, to me, such a much more like natural expression or extension of the person, and how you learn language and learn a whole bunch of other things in life that musically by rote is that equivalent. So that's a really good distinction to make, that sets them apart as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find as an educator, I truly make sure that my students have opportunities where they have to do that. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes in school, we're so much dealing with the rep, learn the rep, mm-hmm. learn the scales. Okay, great. But what are these things happening? Like, you play trombone, like, where's your tuning slide? In your hand, right here. Are you using these things? Like, I was in tune with the tuner. Okay, great. But you weren't in tune with me when we were playing. Okay, the tuner's one thing, but when we play music, we play together, right? Yeah. We don't play with the tuner. So we have to adjust to one another. So I think that's a really critical thing. And I think that was one thing that really struck me when I started really researching the shout band tradition, to just kind of see how well they really could pick up music and very quickly, and just really have a command over the instrument. And I think also learning by rote and utilizing your ear, it kind of frees you from sometimes being confined to what should be correct or what should be possible for certain things. And then you hear it in how they play sometimes, and it's like, it sounds like somebody's singing. It sounds like a group of people just humming when they get together. And that's just stuff that you just can't put in the textbook. That's just stuff that is just organically done. But it comes from a really loving place, and it comes from a place of honesty and really trying to push forward, African American traditions of call and response and syncopation and blue notes and the ring shouts and all of those things, all the way from the West African and slavery traditions, to incorporate that in their music. And so it's just a really beautiful thing to really hear when it comes together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm wondering, we were talking about these traditions that go all the way back. In your research, were you able to kind of pinpoint like an origin for the all brass kind of manifestation of those traditions, or a set of circumstances where that, because I'm just wondering where the nuts and bolts, the all brass instrumentation of this kind of tradition kind of came from.
So the early house of prayer worship, you be mindful. We have to be mindful of that. We were dealing with, because I don't want to go too in depth with you all because we'd be here a while, but we have to be mindful of the circumstances of the people that were playing this music. So it wasn't necessarily to have a brass instrument was a luxury in terms of doing that. So it was, what did we have at first? So originally in early praise bands, I mean, it contended of, string bands, mixed winds and brass, tambourine bands. And this stuff was happening in the 1940s. When this stuff was happening, you really start to see the establishment of I guess, what you would see now in terms of the instrumentation of the shout band really happened under the vision of C.M. Grace, where he wanted to combine both sacred and secular music styles, and this kind of focus on how can we incorporate something that is going to be striking, and it's also going to kind of alert people. And nothing does that better than a brass instrument. Like that's the kind of the point of the brass instrument was to be loud, to be a warning, and to really be there for them. And so you really start to see, I guess, like the first credit with the rise, because this was happening, but we can always say, like, I would say, George Harlan in Newport News, Virginia, would be like the credit of the rise of the shout band. And you see pictures of them, and you see 8 trombones and a sousaphone that they have, and then the little set time. That's actually kind of where you start to see really kind of unfold. And much like every other genre, right? You have to have someone to establish something, and then other people say, oh, I want to get involved in that. And then it continues to grow and it continues to get bigger. And so you really have to kind of look at the people that really started it. But it was definitely the vision of Charles Grace, from what I've researched and what I've been told, that he wanted something that was going to bring people around. And so to talk about that to that extent, if you're starting out, right? He came here from the Cape Verde Islands. And so if you come out and you're trying to expand the church, and so you're going to have tent revivals. A tent revival is outside. What's going to draw people in? Music.
Loud brass instruments.
Yeah.
Right.
That's going to bring people in, right, to find out what's going on. And so the expansion of this happened through different Southern tours that was happening around 1926. And of course, that's when they were selling their own products to kind of build money and do all those different things. But music was definitely at the center aspect of this. And the amazing thing about it was they had church every day. It was every night, and so just imagine the chops. If you're playing every night for extended, amounts of time, the amount of tunes that you're learning, and the amount of different things that are happening, and the amount of different people that you're actually coming in contact with. So I think the brass instruments really came from, of course, the brass band tradition of seeing, oh man, we have these brass instruments. They can parade, they can walk around, they can be seen, they can be heard. This is something that would be very useful for the expansion of our church. And that's kind of how that kind of worked. And now it's definitely the forefront of, most house of prayers. The trombone is the center point, and the shout band is the center point for music in that group, in that institution.
Yeah. I know a lot of people, as they're listening to this episode and maybe learning about shout bands for the first time, hopefully they're hearing it throughout the episode, but then also when they go and explore it more on their own, they'll have the idea of a shout band in their head, but it is primarily a large trombone ensemble. Right?
Yeah. And then you have you have the sousaphone or the back horn as they call it, and the set time, which is the drummer. And so, it's I'm a little partial to trombone because, I play trombone, but there's something about a trombone ensemble that can truly, because you really cover all aspects in terms of range. And so whereas some other instruments just necessarily can't satisfy that in terms of with the ear when you hear those different things. And so when you have those trombones together, it really creates something that is quite remarkable. And then of course, having the slide, it really kind of helps and do the things that the voice could do, with just being able to maneuver from different pitches and slide in between different notes with portamento and different things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then I'm just trying to get the timeline a little bit straight in my head. So you said that the rise in Virginia that you were mentioning was like in the 1920s?
No. So you had the Southern tour, which was happening. So the church was established in 1919. Okay. 1919. And then around 1926. So let me give you the whole timeline. 1919, the church was founded. Okay. It did not formally open until 1921. It was nationally incorporated in 1927. Okay. And then before 1927, there was a Southern tour because they wanted to expand and they really wanted to get brick and mortar churches, because up until then it was just really tent revivals. And then the one church that was in West Wareham, Massachusetts, the original church that was there. And then you had in the 40s, you had the co-ed ensembles, the tambourine bands, and then that really kind of transpired with the early instrumentations that was modeled after the 19th century brass band, where you would have trumpets, you would have some saxes, you would have some bass drums, and then it morphed into being the standard instrumentation in which you see today in terms of the trombones. But I would say 90s, which is, makes it pretty young in that regard of really having some formalized documentation. That's the earliest that I've seen like formalized documentation of that, because you got to realize most people probably weren't like documenting this as it was going. But I'm very thankful that there were some newspaper articles and different things that really documented the people that really tried to step out and kind of do this. So I hope that provides some kind of clarity in terms of it. I wish I had a more definitive date, but I wish I had it for my research.
Yeah. Well, if anybody would have it, it would be you. So I'm confident in that timeline right there as being pretty accurate. So that's all good. Something that you and I talked about a little bit offline in preparing for, well, I guess it was online, off the interview, preparing for this interview was my trying to gain an understanding of if there was any connection to the New Orleans brass band tradition also. Mm-hmm. I know you just said that some of the instrumentation and ideas were based on the 19th century brass band too. Mm-hmm. Is this tied also to that sort of early jazz in New Orleans, or is it kind of have its own path?
I would absolutely say that there are definitely similarities just in terms of the setup, the structural setup, in terms of having leaders, in terms of using improvisation, in terms of playing, hymns and gospel tunes, there's definitely some similarities. I don't want to necessarily pinpoint and say that they're one and the same, but I would definitely say it's very characteristic of things that you would see if you would go down to New Orleans and you would see that. And with it being a southern state, those types of things, and this is where predominantly those houses are, and they call their churches houses, where those houses are brick and mortar institutions, around the southern states. And so I would definitely say that there's some similarities to how they approach performance, and in terms of being a leader, in terms of utilizing improvisation, in terms of moving in a direction that is, you're moved by the spirit, you're moved by the music. And so there's a connection with that. A song can go as long as it needs to go. There's not like, oh, we're at the double bar is coming up, we're done. That's not necessarily the case with this group, because this group is focusing on, being there and serving the needs for the congregation and for that musical thing. So you don't want to necessarily, as my father-in-law's a pastor, so you don't want to quench the spirit at the time, when that's happening. And so I definitely see a correlation between those two, but I definitely see that they're definitely different. And of course, the sacred piece with the shout band tradition.
Gotcha. If one of these bands are playing one of these songs that doesn't necessarily have an ending, how are these groups led, and how are these groups structured in a way that they're able to start and end together and play, if multiple melodies happening, how all that stuff is coordinated?
Well, based on my research, there's definitely a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy. There's a leader. The leader's in charge of the entire band, responsible for organizing music, ensuring that all members, learn the materials, teaching, as well as serves as a spiritual leader for that particular group. You have the run man. The run man is the person that directs the band from the front of the band. And you have the bass horn. The bass horn is responsible for setting the fundamental pitch, which is the sousaphone, and pretty much directs the band from the back of the band. So therefore, you got all three aspects, and there's this communication happen, much like a rhythm section. There's that communication that needs to be happening to make sure you're doing that. But in outside of those things, you have these different subsects. You have the run horn section, which is the section that provides that constant heavy slide vibrato, counter melody to what the leader might be playing. The leaders are going to definitely be employing improvisation, extended techniques in their playing. The background section is providing the chordal structure, that vertical aspect, to make sure that there's some harmony happening. The bass horn, of course, is providing that fundamental pitch for it. The set time, which would be like the drums, is providing the constant pulse. And the back time, that is referred to as the musical accompaniment that's played at a low level. And so this is normally where people can kind of shout and kind of worship. It's like when you have something on the stove and it's simmering. That's what it is. That's the back time. And so when you get that feeling, and it's like, oh man, that just feels so good. And then they normally use that to go into different parts of the song, the ebbs and flows of the song. If they want to go to a climax on a part, or they want to bring it back down and really just kind of have that thing simmer. So it was really interesting for me to kind of learn the structure, because much like you, I wanted to know, well, like, how does all this work? It just, there has to be some kind of structure. But, Kenny Carr was very, he kind of let me know how that worked. And the crazy thing about it is, not really a crazy thing about it, it worked very similar to kind of how we did it at Norfolk State. There was a leader and everybody had a responsibility. When you have over 20 some people, you got to realize that there has to be other people that you check in with to make sure that we're kind of on the same path, much like any kind of huge group that's traveling. But it's really good that everyone knows their role, they understand their role, and they understand their purpose and how they contribute to the ultimate goal of making this beautiful music that will be used for, welcoming people and used for worship in their church.
I'm wondering what the kind of musical content that these bands play are, because I know that there's a very heavy tradition of improvisation, in the culture and everything, and seeing and the little bit I know about how an organist will work in church underneath the preacher and the pastor, and musically call out and highlight things is just something that's totally fascinating and so impressive to me. So what's the kind of musical content? Are there are they out there playing hymns and then going off of that, or is someone shouting a musical idea and the rest of the band's responding? What's kind of the play there?
It's all of that. It's all of the above. And so it's kind of interesting because this is very, like, when you said it to me, I look like this and I'm like, that's my church, yeah. That's like, that happens, and so it's kind of hard for me to kind of put my finger on it and be like, well, this happens at that time when the pastor gets at that point and he reaches that level, then we need to start moving just a little bit and start doing different things. But I think it truly comes back to doing what the Spirit leads you to do in that space. Mm-hmm. But I think, definitely primarily hymns, gospel tunes, and just different things that are, in line for that service or whatever their particular function is, for that or purpose that they would have the group performing for at that time. But yeah, it's definitely led by the Spirit, and of course the leaders will take the charge of setting the initiative to kind of help the rest of the group know how to react to that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Is it kind of a thing where like a jazz combo knows all the jazz standards kind of thing? You could be like, all right, here's Kiss the Bill a Dream On or something. Like, all right, I know what key that's in. They'll be able to just kind of do it. Is that a thing where the band leader will just call out a hymn and everybody knows what key it's in and what the overall shape, the mood of that particular song is supposed to be?
Yeah, I mean, you also have to realize that, I would be at school sometimes and I could just hear them playing for hours. Like, hear them. Like, I'm like blocks away and like I can hear them. So it's like, yeah, they put, you see that? They put in the hours. They put in the hours. That's why I put it. They have put it. That's why I got that. I love that thing because that's why I point to my students. I said today that you put in the hours. Okay, but no, they've. It's just like any other group. I don't see it as being any difference in terms of the amount of time that you've put together to learn this music, to play this music, and they probably played some tunes over and over and over, just like a jazz combo or a jazz quartet, and they know what key it's in, or they, just like when you call out any other tune, they say, hey, we're doing this, and then they go out. But again, like I said, the ear, and then you have different people that are running the different sections. Those people are saying, okay, great, this is what's going on, this is the setup. So it's really good to kind of see the communication. I don't know if you all have checked out any videos on YouTube, just see the communication before they get ready to perform. It's kind of remarkable to see how they come together, and they're all in line. Like it's all it's all about the focus of that performance. There's there's just really nothing like it in terms of kind of seeing that. And so I hope that, more people will be inspired to kind of find out a little bit more about this tradition, because this is an American tradition. And this isn't a tradition that, sometimes we don't always appreciate our American traditions. And I think we should, because we have created some fantastic traditions and fantastic music in this country. And so, and in my opinion, this is one of them. And I will continue to be an advocate, for this particular style of music, because you'd be shocked at how many students that are in school that play my instrument, that play trombone, that's never heard of a shout band or never kind of witnessed it. And it kind of really brings a different piece to it. To say, oh, this is what my instrument can do, or this is what other people are doing with their instrument. And it kind of really opens up. It's no different from you listening to a classical musician and you go, the first time you hear Joe or the first time, you hear Stefan Schultz or, or Wynton, or Andre Hayward, any of those people, it's like, okay, yeah, that's, I got to go practice.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of keeping this in the education and the furthering of the shout band, would it be inappropriate if somebody wanted to start a band outside of the church? Like if you wanted to do hands-on learning with this type of music at the university, would that be something that could be done? Granted, you can't replicate something like,
sure.
It's very difficult doing something like that with the whole culture and tradition built into it and
Absolutely.
being in the church and living it. But yeah, is there an academic reproduction ability of this, or is that kind of disrespectful to this music?
I don't know. That's kind of a hard question to answer, because I think as a student, if you want to learn and find out about it, that is the environment in which you can do so, to find out and to gain an appreciation of it. Would there be a course for it? Probably not. But if someone got together and said, well, man, I really would like to kind of figure that out, or just kind of have a deeper understanding of this particular music, I think it would be, and if it's coming from an honest place, I think that's fine. I'm not a part of this this church, but I have a lot of respect for the purpose and the purpose of this music and what it has done for the trombone community and what it has done for me, just in terms of opening my understanding to thinking beyond what is taught in the classroom, because there is value. There's just so much value. There's just stuff that you just don't learn in the classroom, and there's so much more you learn on the job, because that on the job training, that's invaluable. Yeah. So I think to answer your question, I think if people wanted to do a little bit more and kind of find out a little bit more about it and play and try to mimic that, I think a lot of that is happening, because I think I hear a lot of players that are listening to it, and so when I'm hearing clips and I'm like, okay, I hear the direction that they're trying to go when they're playing that. So I definitely think people are aware. I definitely think people are finding out a little bit more about it, and I think it's touching them on a soulful level that's a little bit more impactful, and they say, well, I really like the way that feel. How can I incorporate a little bit of that into my playing? But in terms of doing that, like you said, you got to live with it, just like any other language. You really kind of have to live with it, and it really has to speak to you. Otherwise, it's not going to come off the way that you want it to come off. In that respect, I think it's no different than people want to, form groups that want to sound like, Young Bloods brass band, and they go and they do that, and then they realize, oh man, that's pretty hard.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not easy playing that stuff. Like, oh man, they sound tight. Let's go and start that group. Yeah, about that. I don't have the chops for that one. You know, it's that kind of thing. But I do think um, students that are intrigued about it, that want to learn a little bit more and want to continue their development, absolutely. And then reach out to people who are a part of it. That was an amazing part for me. You know, a couple of my fraternity brothers I got to interview. That are a part of it and played some really heavy. I think one of them, Hank Bilal, he played at the Grammys. I forgot who he was backing up. It was a huge artist, and she had a shout band behind her at one of the Grammys. I have to go back and find out which one. I'll send you all that. But it was just pretty amazing to just see how he's done that, and then he's also able to kind of cross over to the secular aspect where he's using that now in a soulful aspect. So now it's this jazz piece, but it still has that, you know, that there's something different when you hear him play, and that's his thing now. And so it's really amazing how people have been able to utilize what they've learned from playing in this group and really use it to branch off to do different musical things, both in secular and sacred arenas.
Are there any other notable musicians that come from this tradition that are now kind of out there in the world, maybe doing other things, but came from that church?
Absolutely. Yeah. Kenny Carr is a huge one. And Jeff Bradshaw. I don't know if you all are hip to Jeff Bradshaw, but he's hip. He really got his start playing with Jill Scott out in Philly. And so if you check him out, Jeff Bradshaw's heavy, really good sound. But I truly love Kenny Carr, and I just love his sound. He was just so impactful to me, and a beautiful cat, just a really, really nice person. And he is he's probably, you know, one of my favorites. But yeah, you definitely see people that are doing this, and as you start to see people pop up and I start to listen, your ear starts to open up and say, well, okay, that's a little something. There's a little something that's in there in terms of that. So that's it's good to kind of see people using that, and you're really broadening out your audience, your reach.
Is there any sort of built-in mentorship in the church? And like, are there like tiers? Like, is there like a young band and then they graduate into the adult band or anything kind of like that? Because I know talking to we've had 2 episodes on the Salvation Army band tradition, and they're kind of structured in that way. So I was just kind of curious if there was anything similar in the House of Prayer tradition.
I think it's, you know, when younger musicians want to learn about this, they start getting taught at that point, and then they kind of morph into, you know, of course, when they can hold the instrument and they can do what they need to do, and then they're, you know, if they want to do that, that's their service, you know. And so I don't, you know, there's not a youth band or anything for that matter, but they're definitely working towards to be a part of the band at that particular house to do that. So there's definitely mentorship. There's definitely guidance in terms of how to do things. I mean, you definitely just see that. You know, you see them learning from one another in terms of doing those things. And so I'm pretty sure, just like any other group, you know, if I'm in that group and I'm not a leader and I'm not playing the part, when I go home, I'm trying to work out that melody, you know, and I'm like, so I have it just in case, you know, one day, you know, when it's my time, I have it. And that's just, you know, kind of like how we all do when we hear stuff and we want to continue to grow as musicians, we go home and we kind of work it out. And so, but yeah, there's absolutely mentorship just in terms of helping people, learn this music, and so that more people so that can be a continual steady, influx of people who are participating with it. But, it definitely is a pretty serious commitment.
Yeah, that's a whole different challenge too, having young people coming in on trombone. It's like, hopefully none of the songs go below 5th position.
Yeah. Yeah, for real, for real. So it's
sell a lot of extendabones. Those
plastic, and then also, they will utilize the baritone horn too, for some of those that arms aren't quite as long. The baritone horn, though, are instruments that they would use too, so that they can start participating.
So euphonium's a last resort, is what you're saying?
No, euphonium's a part. Euphonium's that's funny.
Talking to 2 euphonium players.
Yeah. No. I would say the baritone horn. I would say the baritone horn, as opposed to the euphonium in that group, would be a staple. A part of that group, a fixed part of that group for sure, just because of the color and the different wonderful things that instrument, can do. Of course, back to the brass band tradition, those frontward facing bells, having those things, that's definitely a part of that group. And so it's definitely a part of the structural makeup of having those. And then to help those younger students that can't, that don't have the longer arms to do that, or the students, but younger members. That's the teacher coming out of me.
Yeah. Anybody under 21 is a student, right?
Yeah. My gosh. Yeah. I'm a student. I'm still a student. I am still a student. I'm a lifelong student. I tell my students that all the time. I said, when you feel as though you have nothing else to learn, you are in trouble. Okay? Yeah, because when you stop learning, you're in trouble, because there's something that you can learn from everybody. Everybody has value. Everybody has something that they can bring to the table, and that's how you continuously grow.
Yeah, what I love about this show too is, I have the doctorate, Steven's ABD, or knocking on the door of ABD, almost there. We're learning stuff every week doing these interviews, and it's lifelong learners, and anybody that's listening to the show is, I'm sure, the same way.
Absolutely, and that's important. That's the important thing. What I love about you all's podcast is that it allows us as brass musicians. Well, I can just speak in terms of brass because that's my thing. But in terms of this, it really helps you fill in some gaps, and it really lets you know where the gaps are. And I think the most important thing is being a lifelong learner is to understand where you have those gaps and where you need to fill those in at. Because again, you're not going to get it all throughout your matriculation, and we continuously fill in those gaps. Oh, how can I do this? Man, I can't believe I was doing it like this for so many years. This is way so much easier. But it takes time, and it really takes some patience. This is definitely a journey, and so I'm very thankful to be a part as I continue to learn more about the shout band tradition and all brass traditions in general and music. It really kind of helps me to become a better musician and to become more sensitive with how I approach things and the type of things that I program for my students, to kind of make sure that I'm now providing them with the information that I've learned. And I think it's a big sharing thing that should happen and should continue to happen.
Yeah, the more information you learn, the more gaps you uncover.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're scared of the gaps. At some point in our life, we always are a little hesitant of the gaps. But the older I get, I'm like, yeah, I needed to know that. That helps me become the best educator that I can possibly be in this instance. And then as I continue to grow, because you want to give your students the best you can possibly give them. I'm just really thankful that you all, reached out to me and wanted to find out a little bit more about this under-researched topic. I think it's important to, first and foremost, the trombone community, but moreover the brass community, that we understand this and we really have an appreciation for all music and its purpose, because every music has a purpose, every music has a meaning. So I'm very thankful that you all took the time to kind of want to find out a little bit more and kind of get things out to people on a broader spectrum via your platform. So I'm very humbled and very thankful that you all took the time to hit me up about that.
Yeah, of course. So
well,
honored to have you.
Yeah, very, very thankful for your time as well, and for your sharing your research and filling in some gaps that we had, and that because that's one of our goals with the show, is to kind of look at this history of brass, the brass tradition in the United States, because it's not something that's taught in any really kind of formal way at any university that at least I've been affiliated with, or Chris has. So, that's a huge goal. And today's, hour here, has really, really filled in some things for me, I know, and I'm sure Chris as well. So we really thank you for your time on a Sunday morning to sit down with us and chat.
I just want to say, when I was looking at this research at West Virginia University, when I wanted to do this, I told my teacher knew what was up. And then I went to the Horn professor, and God rest her soul, Virginia Thompson, Dr. Thompson. I loved her. She was on my committee when I showed her this, because I was like, what do you think about this? And she says, Joseph, you have to do this. And I remember her saying that. She said, you have to do this. This is going to be something that we need around here, and we need more of it. And she was really supportive of me, and really kind of getting this out there. And so I always just remember that piece, because she passed before I got to finish as a part of my committee. But she was a really big early on supporter, just in terms of me and in terms of finding out more about this shout band tradition once I introduced it to her.
Are you first to market, or are you the first academic piece of writing on shout bands?
No, absolutely not. So I'm really glad you asked that. So I think there's 6 now. You got Sherry Damon, Matthew Hafar, Bruce Hanchett, and Nick Spencer's did some booklet notes. I did mine, and I think one of Tony Baker's students did something maybe a year or 2 ago. So there isn't a wealth of information. Dr. Damon's research was pretty heavy, just in terms of the amount of stuff and that she put in there. But at the University of North Carolina, she was around all of this stuff, because the actual mother church and the mansion and everything, it's all in Charlotte.
Oh, wow. It's
huge. And so she was really around all of that stuff. So there's about 6 of us so far that has really put in some, so you think about it, there's only 6, and out of all this research, and, there's more people that know about it that don't know about it, like around our ages and stuff like that, or have heard of it. So we're just hoping to keep getting it out there and have more people to find out a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's just crazy, because when you watch these videos, they're not brass quintets walking down the street or anything. These are like 30, 40, 50-piece trombone ensembles, like rocking it. And
yes,
how is this not being talked about more? It's like a large group of people, and that's in one video. It's happening all over
one video. Absolutely, yeah. So it's something that I have enjoyed finding out more about, and I'm really thankful for that.
this has been great. This has been fantastic. And again, reiterate our thanks for your time today. Where can people go if they want to find out more about your research, more about this topic, more about you, what you've got going on, and all that good stuff?
Well, all my research is at the WVU libraries. All that stuff can be Googled. You can find out about me. You can follow me on Joseph L. Jefferson _ trombonist on Instagram. JosephLJefferson.com is my website. I'm on Facebook. I'd love to connect with anybody that wants to talk, music or brass. And it's just constantly trying to improve because I'm looking to learn from people and and looking to share. So I'm pretty active performing and presenting across the country. So I keep my calendar updated, pretty regularly. So, I hope to be able to connect with people, but I'd love to be able to connect with some people from this podcast.
Definitely. We'll have all links to your website and all that stuff you just mentioned up on our show notes page. So if anyone's interested for some clickable things, if you want to skip a Google search, you can go to Excellent. Our website.
Outstanding. Outstanding. This has been wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, awesome, Joe. It's been
Thank you.
A lot of fun. There's actually two pieces of information that are kind of interesting. Dr. Jefferson confirmed after the episode that members of the United House of Prayer and their shout bands are not able to take secular gigs when they're members of the church and playing with the bands. If they want to play that sort of music, they are no longer allowed to play in the church. And that goes into something interesting that I found. I thought that Wycliffe Gordon has that shout band kind of flavor to his sound. So I was trying to find if Wycliffe grew up in the shout band tradition, and he actually didn't. He found in high school and in college and later in life, found this shout music tradition much later and was so interested by it, but actually said that he was not able to just walk into a church and play in one of those bands because it was not allowed. He was able to eventually, be inspired by that music and try to adapt that style into his sound and his interpretation and make music other ways after the fact. But we thought that this was an interesting part of the story of the United House of Prayer shout bands. Thank you so much to Dr. Joseph Jefferson for coming on to the Early American Brass Band podcast. I know Stephen and I both learned a lot this episode, and we're really excited to help become advocates and sharers of this tradition of music.
Yeah, I'm going to go listen to some of the musicians he mentioned right now. I've still got my tabs open from Googling them during the episode, so I'm excited to dive a little deeper into this after talking with Joseph today. So if you like what you're hearing, as we said in the top, Patreon, Teespring, social media, YouTube, our website, our email address. Get in touch with us. We love to hear from you. Hear your thoughts on the show, suggestions for future episodes, all that good stuff. We'll have our show notes, as always, up on the website for this episode, where we'll have links to things that we mentioned and some information if you want to talk to Dr. Jefferson about any of this stuff, some good ways to get in touch with him. So we hope you'll check that out.
This episode's featured album is going to be a little bit different. Stephen and I are going to handpick a handful of shout band videos on YouTube that we both enjoy, and we're going to put them as a list on our show notes as the featured album for this week. So make sure you go over to our website at eabbpodcast.com, find the show notes tab, click on this episode, and you'll see a list under featured album of a number of videos that Stephen and I have handpicked for you to listen. So go listen to them.
Yeah.
We handpicked them, so you got to do it, or else, it's
wasted effort.
Okay, there you go. Wasted effort. I was gonna say wasted time. It's not wasted time.
No, because I'm gonna have a lot of fun picking out my contributions to the list, so it's not wasted time. But we do, in all seriousness, hope that you'll go check these out, especially if you're not familiar with them already. This tradition. So we hope to see you over there on the website. Poke around a bit while you're there. Say hi, and we'll catch you in the next episode.